Welcome back to the VMware to Microsoft podcast. I'm your host, Michael Richardson, CTO, Dynamic Consultants Group, and author at richardsoncloud.com. Back with me, I have Daniel Apps coming to us from the land down under. He's a Microsoft MVP with expertise in Azure hybrid solutions. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for having me. So it's 11 p.m. and I'm pumped up on caffeine. So yes.
No, awesome. Thanks for coming back. The reason I asked you to come back is I know you have some good customer success stories, and I'd love to share those with our audience. Really just looking to boost confidence that moving from VMware is a good idea. You can do this successfully. I know you won't be able to share like every little detail, but I'm excited to hear what you can share. And so let's start out just talking about your first example. Tell us a story.
Yeah, cool. I've got to make sure that I don't slip too much here, but I've got three examples for you that I've been thinking about sharing, and they're all sort of have their own sort of angles and quirks. The first one I'd like to talk about is in a manufacturing organization here in Australia, and they had a bunch of warehouses. Actually, this is a theme for two examples where there were companies that mergers and acquisitions bought a few manufacturing facilities and had a bunch of disparate infrastructure, but they'd built up that a lot of their tech in the manufacturing facilities was sort of coordinated by operations people, not really IT people. So they need to go get a new labeling system or a new scanning or printing or whatever it might be. They'd go to the vendor, and the vendor go, yeah, we've got this application, we'll wheel it in, we'll ship you 100 Ks worth of hardware, and they'll just build a basic VMware cluster or some sort of variant. And they had these kind of disparate systems around their factories, or they'd got a desktop, and thrown a Windows Server OS on it and plug it in and sit on top of a cabinet somewhere, and it's running the most critical labeling system in their factory for for hundreds of thousands of dollars per day kind of thing. But it's this little $200 PC built in the 1995. And there's various sort of little horror stories of workloads like that, and they were looking to sort of consolidate but being the FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods industry, they're like sort of retail, like the penny pinch, and they were looking for the most cost-effective ways of doing things. And we being a sort of a Microsoft Hyper-V shop, recommended to sort of deploy and do some migrations there. So we ended up with a couple of sites with some Azure Stack HCI clusters. So this is pre Azure Stack HCI as we know it now, was when Azure Stack HCI was a program. So it's essentially Windows Server with S2D. And then we had a couple of smaller sites with just single nodes or remote parts of the facility with single node Hyper-V. Obviously the cost reduction there of instead of going to an application vendor and saying, hey, look, they go, yeah, here's it's a 150K for two VMware nodes and a nice SCSI SAN or something like that. Just some commodity off the shelf hardware and some simplified management. It allowed us to consolidate the security layer, so consistent username, so consistent AD. So there wasn't repositories of vCenters or ESXIs or various local work group passwords and whatnot. So it kind of gave them a little bit more comfort in that realm. But with the clusters, so I think it was 3 sites that did 2-node S2D clusters that gave them high availability, so it allowed them to deploy their applications. With many of the applications that were highly available had A and B nodes, so like a SQL cluster or a web application cluster or whatever it might be. So I gave them that high availability, so we could do maintenance and things like that, and they continue to run their factories. And these factories were this one was 24/6, so they run 24 hours, 6 days a week. And any kind of downtime on these things, on these systems, would lead to basically severe cost loss, so or severe revenue loss. So having those clusters on those sites were really low entry point as well. So not overly expensive hardware, just a couple of, I think that these were, I think this customer actually had a mix of HP and Lenovo nodes, but essentially we do little 1U servers, 4 SSDs, two M.2s for the OS, obviously, but four SSDs in each node, a bit of nested resiliency, and happy days. That was a great experience. Super high performance for the storage, for the kind of workloads they were running, and highly available, and didn't cost them an arm and a leg. So they were very happy with that. The smaller sites, which ran single Hyper-V server, whack a couple of SSDs in there, and which were pretty cheap even back then. It allowed them to. They didn't want to. Again, cost is quite a high focus on this theme, as you'll probably see the theme as we go. But they're allowed to leverage things like Hyper-V Replica to do some DR kind of things. So we would have factory A and factory B, different sides of the city, or even in different states or whatever, and then we would have workloads on either side, just replica to each side, and whack a big disk in the second site and just replica to that or whatever. And so it gave them a DR strategy without having to pay extra, because that's just a native feature. The migration was really simple. So it was a mix of basic tools, and again, there's two themes. This was repeat itself, this one, but Microsoft Virtual Machine Converter, even though well past its supportability date, you can still get it, and it still works for what did work for those who were VMware like 5.5. So this is like 2018, 2019. So and for the ones that were old, for newer, we use Disk to VHD. So just a sysinternals tool, absolutely awesome tool. That's been in my toolbox for many years. Been doing a lot of P2Vs with that. But so deploying these clusters allowed them to get some high availability where it was required, some extra, like a huge performance boost without breaking the bank. Gave them security so it gave them peace of mind that the security profile of the clusters was centralized and managed, so we could actually have an infrastructure domain where it's, so we could lock it down, not just local work group usernames and that everywhere. And gave them a DR option there. Their head office ended up being using Azure Site Recovery. So their workloads for their RDP and all that kind of stuff, they were actually replicated to Azure, because they were that just made sense to them. But the factories just used some Hyper-V stuff to other sites. So it was a nice little solution for them. I'm just trying to think. That was a while ago, before I had these gray hairs, but I'm trying to think of the downsides, if there are any sort of pitfalls or whatever. It wasn't really. It was just because it was a really simple solution. It wasn't overly complex. It was just multiple sites. I think it was 5 or so, 3 with clusters and 2 with single nodes. Again, drawing on some old memories here. But it was just a great experience. So for our team, it wasn't a huge learning curve when it came to the management of it, because we've been running Hyper-V since day one, really. So the sort of the skills and familiarity with the tools and whatnot were already there. So it wasn't a huge learning curve for us. They were using, I think that customer was using Data Protection Manager, the System Center Data Protection Manager, which then became Azure Backup, and then I think they moved we moved them to Commvault, I think. But all worked, with those with Hyper-V as well. So there was no compatibility issue there. It was a nice little transition. Saved them $7 and got them to features that they just was unobtainium before that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, it sounds like one of the biggest drivers was really cost savings, while also it sounds like they had some technical debt of, they had things kind of scattered here and there, and just this really allowed them to modernize without breaking the bank and getting the features they needed. So that sounds really neat. Did they consider any other solutions at the time? Do you remember?
Look, not really, because we were the driving, well, we were the managed service provider for them. Helping them. We did full stack management for them, so help desk and everything for them. So there was not really any other consideration because we'd been so familiar with Hyper-V and we knew the benefits of using that and pitfalls. And the gaps that were in that still are in Hyper-V in some areas around the management. We'd had that covered because of our experience and our day-to-day usage from the team. So there was nothing really else considered. And I think that comes back to that you highlight, that you've pulled up the point. The main driver here was cost. So any other solution really would have been a cost anyway. So this
Yep.
allowed us to, whilst the HCI clusters were all new acquisitions, I think one of the sites might have even just been a repurposed server
Mhm.
that they just maybe put some memory in or whacked an extra couple of disks in or something. So there was ways to sort of leverage that as well. So there was no other solutions looked at for that one.
Cool, cool. I mean, it sounds like, it was a success. They're still running. It seems like it's met all their needs. It sounds like it wasn't a painful process either.
No, they're actually since that migration, they've actually upgraded those to actual Azure Stack HCI, so to 22H2. I think it was 21H2 when they first did the upgrade, and they're now on 22H2. And I think it was only maybe 3 weeks ago, I actually had a ping appear in my Teams from the guy who looks after the all of that out there for them. So it's also running, and they're also very happy with it. So huge success there.
Awesome.
Yeah. I guess I've got two more.
Yeah, yeah, go
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So a second one is there's a bit of a story on this one. This was a FMCG, so similar industry, but bit larger, and they were a pet food company, but they also went on a buying spree. It was a bit of a common theme, sort of in the 2010s in Australia, and they bought a few other companies, and one of the companies that they bought had the VMware cluster, with some iSCSI, workloads, and they're running some Citrix and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't huge. It was only 30 workloads, but enough to be significant to to warrant a cluster, and they needed to consolidate. It was actually a two-pronged approach, this one. What we did was we actually shipped out some hardware on site, and did a conversion from VMware to Hyper-V locally. So we got the benefits of that local bus speed rather than having to migrate across the network, because we're also actually bringing those centralized into the main data center for that the organization, taking it out of the head office of the company they bought into the main colo facility. So yeah, we did the conversion overnight. Actually, I think it was over a couple of nights where we grabbed, a handful of workloads, converted them next, and run the business, because then it doesn't really matter whether it's on Hyper-V or VMware at the end of the day, they can still work on. And then, converted the rest. And then once we'd converted them all, we'd then use Hyper-V Replica to replicate those to the main data center, across the WAN. So it was nice and throttled and whatnot. It took about a bit over a week. I think it might have been about 2 weeks to do the full seed and catch up with the replica. And then we just wait until the next maintenance period. And basically, it was essentially a reboot from what they experienced, was actually the migration from one data center to another. And that was so it was a VMware cluster with running iSCSI, storage to a local Hyper-V servers, not clusters, but then we replicated those into a Hyper-V with storage spaces direct in a data center. Real tangible improvements here. So that customer was running Sage MicroPay, I think it was. And they had this payroll reporting thing that used to run. It used to take them 4 hours overnight. They just let it run overnight. They'd come in the next morning and there it was, 4 hours. They actually, the first time they ran it, it finished before they'd left for the day. So I actually finished within about 5 or 6 minutes, and they thought, oh, something's wrong. I get the phone call. So, but no, it actually, because of the performance improvements was so vast that the 4-hour report went down to, it was, I might exaggerate 6 minutes, might have been 10, but it was like a drastic improvement. And that's the storage spaces direct, right? Like, it's the best software to find out there just by a country mile. And that's just it is anecdote for some random guy on the internet. But it was a great experience there. So I guess, so just to summarize, it was, so a VMware to Hyper-V locally, and then we used Hyper-V Replica to get that into to ship that into a data center. So the workload types on that was Citrix Farm, a couple of SQL servers, a couple of app servers. But again, they were actually 24/7. They shut down, I think, 12 days a year, and not Christmas Day. They actually work Christmas Day, but they shut down 12 days a year. So uptime was paramount. They had, I think, this particular cluster was running 4 sites, manufacturing 24 hours. So, delivering labels, delivering, picking orders, packing lists, all that kind of stuff, right? So if some component went down or was unavailable, production would stop. During the transition, they had my number, and I actually remember during the conversion, they actually didn't communicate to the team at night, and there was like a half an hour window where we were taking one workload offline, and we get these calls frantically going, oh, we can't print labels, whatever. And we explained, okay, cool, the production manager, and then, oh yeah, well, yeah, Jim told me, but I forgot to tell so and so, kind of thing. But it just showed the importance of that. So that was was a great transition. Again, it was a managed solution, so we didn't feel any pain of of technology skill gaps or anything like that. So it was really just sort of coordinating that migration, because again, fast-moving consumer goods, they watch their pennies. They didn't want to. We tried to balance the value of cost for zero downtime or close to zero downtime migration versus the effort. This is 2019. So it was they wanted to save their pennies. So but it was a great result. Super huge performance boost, and they went from just a cluster out of a remote facility, decentralized, across a workload, across replicating across a WAN. It was really cool. I don't think that company got bought by another company. I don't think actually. I don't think we do have a relationship with them anymore. But I remember I actually went out to dinner that night, and I was actually the lead on doing the conversion on one of the nights, and I'd actually had a couple of glasses of red, feeling a little bit tipsy. Went, get back, click the button. It was just so easy because we just muscle memory the process. And said to my colleague next morning, he goes, "Hey, what happened with the migration? Weren't we supposed to do that last night? We went out to dinner. We had a couple of drinks, whatever." I said, "Yeah, no, I went back and did it." So I probably shouldn't share that. But it was just such a simple process that you can have a glass or two of red under your belt and still more than confident to do it. There were no drawbacks. Again, I'm not to say there is no drawbacks from doing VMware or no things to watch out for, but because it was a managed solution, and our team had the pedigree, or has the pedigree to manage it, there was sort of no skill gap there. But another great success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really a good call out too. That there is a different skill set with Hyper-V versus VMware, and I don't think anybody's pretending that somebody can just go from VMware to Hyper-V in a day and be an expert. But there's people out there that are experts and can help through that process, and so I think that's really an important component of this is to say, okay, if you are looking at moving from VMware to Hyper-V or Azure Stack HCI, like you might want a little bit of help in the process to make sure it goes smoothly, but it's absolutely manageable. I mean, something that can be learned, and there's a ton of similarities and similar concepts, but that's really good to hear, some more success stories here. And, again, I mean, it sounds like cost is such a driver in a lot of these. And, the comparable VMware solution would be significantly more expensive. It's just reality. But, the Hyper-V and Storage Space's direct solution met all their needs. It was way better than what they had, huge performance boost, and ultimately it's running their business, and it's available, right? And that's really what counts. So
Something I'll throw in there is, again, it's just random anecdote for some nif on the internet, is Hyper-V, every service provider, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be running Hyper-V. If you're doing a managed solution for a customer, Hyper-V is a consideration because it's a lower cost point, and you're willing to take a little bit extra pain, if you will, or it's a different skill set to manage. Whereas, did I just lose you? No?
nope, I'm still here.
Oh yeah, cool. Whereas, like a lot of the people who are running internal IT, they're not really don't really care about the cost because they're not going to get fired or they're not going to get replaced with another MSP who is cheaper. So they're quite happy to spend the extra few dollars on the vCenter and whatnot. That's not the only driver, of course, but it's not an uncommon thing. You talk to a lot of service providers. That's where Hyper-V and S2D really is popular, is in that ecosystem, because it drives their cost of platform down, and can actually their cost of sale down. Provide better value for their customers or a little bit more margin. But so cost is a driver. But that one was more about a consolidation, and we were managing the parent company who'd already been converted to Hyper-V many years before, and it was it just made sense to convert them as well. But it was nice when the financial controller of the company that got bought said, "Oh, we need to renew this." We're like, "No, you don't." Like, "Oh, well, that's 30-40 grand that we don't need to."
Yeah.
We can save. How much is the one we cost? All included.
Yes.
So that was a nice little win for them there. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, so Microsoft Virtual Machine Converter and disk to VHD were the tools used there with Hyper-V Replica to send it from one site to the other.
Cool.
So yeah, that was a cool one. I've got one more.
Yeah, we got time. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. So this one's I don't know if they'll end up listening to this, but they're probably my favorite customer at the moment. I'll say at the moment, but it's a critical infrastructure organisation, a government critical infrastructure here in Australia, in New South Wales. And there is just absolutely no room for downtime. They've got many line of business, many OT style applications, so more like operation technology, but in their on this cluster, on their environment, and very odd hours. They could be in the middle of the day, they could be chilling out, but then in the middle of the night they could be at peak, or vice versa. So their kind of schedule is all over the place. They really are a 24/7 organization. And they had a VMware cluster 6.5, I think it was, sitting in a data center, starting to burn. They needed to do something. They were sick of managing it themselves. They don't want to manage it themselves. they want it taken care of, but they needed to bring it forward as well. So they're starting with performance issues. They were hitting their warranty. They'd kind of spent everything on their sort of cloud adoption plan, and they're kind of like a cloud first kind of methodology and whatnot. But we then proposed a managed Azure Stack HCI. So we went through the conversion. They said yes, obviously. So we then built an Azure Stack HCI dedicated for them. Put in a data center, put all the bells and whistles around it. So it's a hybrid solution. So it's got SSDs or an NVMe in front of spindles. I know if JT hears that, he'll probably have a conniption, but it works amazing. But yeah, so we did a conversion. There are a few quirks with that one though, because we were doing a data center migration. So we're going from one data center facility to another, and we're converting from VMware to Hyper VMware, so HCI. We wanted to use VMM, but we had challenges around the FQDNs and domain credentials and all these kinds of various quirks. SCM just kept on failing, and I consider myself pretty proficient with SVMM. So I was a bit miffed about that, why it wouldn't work. I couldn't find a reason, and I'm aware of the whole DNS stuff and whatever. If Noni listens to that and goes, "Hey, you can do this," but so we actually had a bit of a blockage there, not a blockage, but a bit of a hurdle. So that was going to be our conversion tool. Within our back pocket, we've obviously got Discovery HD and Starwind. Starwind's also a good tool that we use as well. For this one, we ended up switching gears, and for their stuff where they could tolerate maintenance windows, and we're happy with that sort of migration time. To squeeze the cost down, we used Starwind V2V, which worked really well most of the time. It's not perfect, but for their mission critical stuff, we actually use Carbonite. So Carbonite partner, I'm a huge fan of their technology. It's just again, nothing's perfect, but it's got its quirks, but it worked really well. So we basically had a mix of, I think it ended up being about 60% of the workloads were done using Starwind and 40% were done using Carbonite. Actually, and they had 15 or 20 Azure workloads that we brought down, shut them down, bit of AZ copy, easy. And with that migration took a bit of time because there was a lot of due diligence around each application group. Bit bigger, still a not a huge environment. It was about 115 workloads or something like that. So enough to give you headaches. But yeah, so it was just basically grouping the applications into and getting the key stakeholders to do their pre-migration checks, the post-migration checks. Some applications we actually did a migration test, POC, make sure that all worked, et cetera, et cetera. So it took a few months. Nothing to do with the technology. We actually, between data centers, we had a nice big 10 gig cross connect and a secondary service using something called Megaport. I don't know, do you have Megaport in?
I've heard of them. I think they may be here. So
awesome, absolutely awesome. If you're doing anything with data center interconnectivity, Megaport is your friend. Phenomenal. So that was our sort of A and B circuit. So we had nice high bandwidth. So to convert even to use Starwind to convert a 120 gig VM took 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So it was an extended reboot, is what they felt. So we actually had a policy, if you will. So anything over 250, 200 gig, 250 gig, something like that. If it was production, then we would use Carbonite, because we didn't want them to experience any downtime, or as minimal downtime as possible as well. So so that'll worked really well once we sort of got over that hurdle of SVMM not working properly. And we actually unearthed a bug in the SVMM. So once we were removing SVMM off, it didn't actually remove the filter driver from the virtual switch, and the
Mm.
DHCP filter driver was there, and it kind of caused a few bits and pieces, and then we ended up, it took months to get rectified. But it wasn't crippling or anything, but it was just a bug that we identified. But yeah, so that was that migration. We've done sort of even though it's a fully managed solution, we really like these guys, so we've actually given them access to the management tools, and even though we're on the hook, for it all. So
Yeah.
if you guys are listening, please don't break it. But it was funny when we first when the cluster's all sitting there ready to go. I showed them Windows Admin Center extension in the Azure portal, and they're like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is awesome. We can use RBAC, and we've got our own MFA and all that kind of stuff. We don't even need VPNs. It's like this is phenomenal. Ticks huge amount of boxes, right? Like it's a great concept." Until we started loading VMs up on it, right? Obviously, if you've used Windows Admin Center, where you've got lots of VMs on your clusters, the virtual machines view can take a bit of time because it's all based on PowerShell queries. Whilst that was almost 2 years ago. It was 18 months ago when they first got access to that. So it has improved dramatically, but it's still not the snappiest. But that was quite funny. It was like, it was day one. It was like, oh man, this is awesome. This is awesome. And then after we started, I think we got up to like 60, 70 workloads, and they're like, Dan, mate, this admin center is just painful. We need to fix this. Like, yeah, okay, we got there. We got there. Yeah. So, but so they moved back to the inbox tool. So the failover cluster manager and Hyper-V manager for their stuff. But we've actually, our team actually used a whole bunch of PowerShell stuff that we've done ourselves. So we actually deploy using PowerShell scripts and do a bit of lifecycle management through that. So yeah, from our team, from our management side of things, piece of cake, because whether it was Hyper-V or Hyper-V with Storage Spaces Direct or Azure Stack HCI, which is Hyper-V with Storage Spaces Direct, it's the same. It's very much the same management experience for us. So, so yeah, that's another great win there. So
yeah,
the 22H2,
awesome.
they're still on 22H2. By the way, just call that one out.
Yeah. So, for this one, they have quite a bit of critical workloads going. I mean, did they really notice any issues going from VMware to Azure Stack HCI?
No. There's well, with everything there's bugs. So during I said no, but I mean during the transition, no. The first couple of months, absolutely phenomenal. To the point that, and similar to the story that I told in the last one, is I get a call from the lead engineer. He goes, Dan, you're gonna believe this. I just got a phone call from one of the app owners saying something's wrong. That the application came up way too fast. Something's wrong. Something's not right. And it was like, and he was like, mate, no word of a lie. I was like, that's hilarious. Because they're going from lots of spinning Rust with maybe a couple of SSDs to NVMe. And each NVMe I think was like 120,000 IOPS. So and there's 4 of them in each node or something like that. So I think when we did when I did my initial bench test VM fleet early on, it was punching out. It was a 5-node cluster punching out somewhere around 2.8 million IOPS. So there's performance there that they just never had before. So but on the downside though is we've had a couple of twice now it's happened, and I think they're different symptoms, but is during maintenance, because something that we do in our Hyper-V clusters is we mandate monthly maintenance, and if we can not do patching, we at least do reboot cycles. Just keeps that WMI nice and clean, and also helps us identify any issues with VMs or have any if there's any stuck checkpoints or anything like that. Just keeps it nice and clean. We don't run it like a VMware where it's security by obscurity. People don't reboot their clusters up, for nodes for 6, 9, 12 months. Whereas Microsoft put on their security extensions. But the twice now it's happened where the VM's lost connectivity. So the first time was around the bug that I mentioned. So that's all been fixed, which is great. But the last one was one workload could not connect to another workload. There were no other issues that we found, but there was just one VM in the cluster couldn't communicate with one VM, so we actually live migrated them to the same node, and all of a sudden it fixed it. So I thought it was something to maybe do, because we've got SDN deployed. They're not actually using it. Part of the initial scope was we're going to build SDN and do some GRE gateways and do some layer 3 stuff. They've decided to go another way. Networking people don't like SDN because it takes away from their, reduces the amount of routers they get to buy. But I thought it was something to do with the SDN. Some sort of ACL or something, some host table or provider address not updating or refreshing or whatever it was. But no, when the SDN's all nice and healthy. I actually now know a new PowerShell command which actually can tell whether actually there's like SDN is actually interacting with that NIC or not. But yeah, so that's one bug there that we're not quite sure on. So to the point that we typically with our maintenance cycles is we would just go, yep, drain a node, patch, reboot, do your tests, go to the next node, drain, and then it would typically just disperse loads back, VMs back onto that first node or across, and then go through the process, right? But because we want to sort of be a bit more, reduce the amount of moves, we're actually in the next maintenance cycle with them, we're actually doing pre-maintenance maintenance, where we're actually going to, I think the day before or 2 days before or whatever it is, we're actually going to hit one of the nodes. We're just going to drain it initially, and then we're going to obviously have the monitor. So there's going to be about 25 workloads, and we're going to, the team is going to go, look, these are the workloads that are running on the cloud. Let's migrate it away, and make sure that it's all your applications are all working. And so then once we actually do the patch cycle on the following day, we have a very controlled, okay, well, node 1's empty, so we patch and do that. Then all the VMs on node 2, we're actually going to manually move those to node 1. So it's only one move that they ever do during the maintenance, and then drain node 2. So then redo node 2, then go to node 3, manually move those to node 2. It's extra, probably slightly unnecessary, but just because it is such critical infrastructure, we don't want to have any things. And look, you PowerShell that. It's like super fast anyway. Get VM, move VM kind of thing. Don't go to PowerShell and type get VM, move VM. Actually, it'll fail, but yeah, there's obviously a few more parameters there. But yeah, so that's something we've hit. Originally I was thinking something about like ARP table refreshes, but then that doesn't make sense because the MAC address doesn't change. So not quite sure. That reminds me of like back in the days of 2008 R2, running Hyper-V back then. Geez, those were some dark days. But it wasn't that bad. Whereas, yeah, VMs would just randomly lose connection, and not all your VMs. They'd be like, we were hosting 200 odd VMs at the time, and one of the servers would just be unavailable. Disconnect, reconnect, or live migrate, and all of a sudden it'll come back. So this issue was weird. I haven't seen that kind of an issue for so many years. So anyway.
Interesting. So, but I mean, other than you had the SCVMM thing, which was a kind of a holdover from, well, we were going to use it and then we didn't, and then you had this kind of one isolated connectivity thing. Sounds like it's been a positive experience overall, right? That from their perspective, the migration was really a success, and things are going well. Nobody's really got any complaints, and
well, they're firing up a second cluster. So actually, we're in
Well,
the
there you
process
go.
of firing up a second one. So they've bought more, and there was no question about is this the right technology or anything like that. It was purely like, yep, let's do it. We
Of
need
course,
this.
we'll use that because it
Yeah,
works.
yeah. It's not even. It's just assumed. So yeah, and look, again, we are a managed service provider, so it's kind of the service we're providing. So we're providing a bit of extra love and care and whatnot. So we're kind of influencing down that path. We're not going to
Yeah.
go in and but it's a no-brainer, right? And now they're going to have the ability to use Hyper-V replica between those two. So but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's working with these solutions, like we know they work and we know they're solid, but I think for the community, it's really helpful to hear some of these, like, yeah, people really are moving from VMware to Hyper-V, and it really does work, and it really doesn't have to be painful, and it's a solid solution. So I really
Well,
appreciate you jumping on and sharing some of these.
no, that's fine. Look, I just will clarify. They're just three examples that I pulled out, which are specifically VMware to Hyper-V. We've helped organizations build, like deploy, optimize, run Hyper-V on much larger scale, and it just works so well.
Yeah.
I'm actually just I'm in the early stages of helping another organization here in the energy sector, and they've got I think it was about a dozen clusters that they're going to be converting. So we're actually just about to engage. They've engaged us because we've helped them build a whole bunch of Hyper-V stuff in other parts of their business, like 20 odd clusters, 40 odd clusters. So that's another one that's happening. So I just wanted to sort of, and we've got stuff in healthcare, we've got stuff in finance, but I just picked these three because I can talk to them a little bit more confidently without getting in too much trouble. But also I thought they were interesting because of the types of migrations that they were and the different quirks that they had.
Yep. Yep. No, that's awesome. So some of those that are in the pipeline today are also VMware to Hyper-V conversions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was. I've been working with Hyper-V for a long time, and sort of Australia. It's kind of a bit of a small village on a big island, really. But I've met a few people over the years in the industry, and they kind of know me as the Hyper-V guy, or as a Hyper-V guy. And it's when the VMware thing dropped. I had a few SMSs and a few LinkedIn messages and a few emails. Saying, hey, you must be happy and you're busy and you saw. Who would have believed that this stuff you called out is actually going to come true? Rah, rah. Yeah, like there's actually a few organizations that are going down that path, and there's lots of murmurs now, and lots of genuine talk about VMware migrations, and they're not. I think I've maybe mentioned this once or twice before when we've caught up. Is it's not even a will it work, does it work? It's more of a okay, we're doing this. What are the differences? What are the challenges? What are the
Hmm.
things? I think that people are taking a much more considered approach. And I think Hyper-V and particularly S2D has copped a bad name over the years because they haven't been considered approaches. They've just been, we'll just turn this stuff on, or the documentation has been great, or whatever it might be. But any sort of larger organization that's doing this stuff is doing it well, and Hyper-V works damn well. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to that management experience, depending on the tool set. I'm a huge PowerShell advocate. I know that there's a large retailer here that's got something like 3,000 clusters, and they just PowerShell everything. So yeah, if you're an SMB, and you just want a basic cluster and you're running VMware and you want to do that conversion, the technology will work. Just make sure you do your due diligence and get some assistance. It's not just a tick box in Windows Server. Well, technically it is, but it's not just a tick box in Windows Server. It automatically, magically works. It's there's some differences.
Yep. No, that's important. Well, this has all been really helpful, and I hopefully this helps out our audience. I think it will. So I really appreciate you coming back on and sharing some of these stories, and we'll be excited to see the community response, and maybe there'll be some discussion around it as well. So thanks again. Again. My name is Michael Richardson. This is the VMware to Microsoft podcast, and thanks Daniel Apps for joining.
Welcome, pleasure to be here.